Hey everyone, Bosbafak here. And today I'm making a video in response to one of my viewers who actually asked me an interesting question. And the question is, how should I start a wine collection? And so, this is something that I spend a fair bit of my time doing, which is curating my wine collection, my cigar collection, and then of course also my pocket knife collection. I have a big interest in pocket knives as well. So I thought I'd just spend a bit of time focusing on wine here. Just first off, on the arm and the wrist today is my Day-Date 40, my Rolex Day-Date 40 in rose gold. In the pocket today, the pocket knife I'm carrying is a pocket knife made by Greg Medford. And I'm a big Greg Medford fan. And this is a very sort of an art piece. It's called the Marauder H, just a beautiful knife. Anyhow, so back to this. How should one start thinking about their wines and collecting wine? Well, listen, there's a few things, right? It really depends on what your objective is. Are you buying for investment or are you buying to drink? My intention has always been to actually consume all the wines that I'm collecting. I like wines with a bit of age on them. I like a thing called equilibrium. So what happens is when wine is initially made, and different wines obviously have different periods of time where they will get to their maturity. But when initially wine has certain attributes to it, and they are sugar content, acidity, the alcohol, tannin, and all of these things initially start off totally out of equilibrium because they're made to age over time. And then, as we say, knit together over a period of time. Could take anywhere from 7 to 20 years where they hit their equilibrium or their peak, and they'll stay at that for a while depending on how well they're made. But what you want, and that's that sort of a that softening of the wine, particularly red wines and Chardonnay too. But what will happen is they'll be fairly acidic maybe initially if they're opened up too early, or have high tannins, but as they soften and meld together to hit equilibrium, they are this beautiful marshmallowy, jammy, actually jammy is the wrong word. It means something to me, but it's used in a different context from the winemaking industry. But it's really soft, and you can start tasting some of the complexity of the wines, the flavors of the wines. So collecting and curating. So assuming you're not someone with a massive budget and you're not looking for an investment, I'm going to make the assumption that you want to start building a cellar, an area that you are going to start aging some wine, maybe over 4, 7, 10 years, and you want to actually enjoy seeing how these wines evolve and get to that point of equilibrium, because that's really the fun for me. That's really the fun in wine. Now, what you'll see, this is my wine cellar. I have about 1,000 bottles. This can hold about 1,100 bottles. And that's kind of, how I collect my wines. So what you'll notice with me is I'll buy my wines typically in threes. And so for me, I'm trying to find that point of equilibrium. I'll usually have a first bottle after about 7 years. The second that first bottle will tell me where we're going in terms of equilibrium and how far away we might be. So in 7 to 10 years, depending on the wine, I'll open a bottle, and that'll give me a sense of how the bottle's maturing and where it's going. So it may just say to me, look, we're getting there, we're still a ways away, but you should probably have the next wine either in 3 years, or maybe you'll have to have the next bottle in 10 years or 15 years, and it'll give me a sense. I'll then have my second bottle after what the first bottle's just told me, and then that second bottle will either then be absolutely perfect at equilibrium, and I'll know I should have the second bottle close to that, or I still might not be there, and then I'll be timing this third one quite perfectly. It should give me a good sense of where the final bottle, and that's the game that I'm playing with when I'm collecting my wine. I'm trying to get to that point where I'm getting for that perfect taste. Some of the wines I might have had for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and I finally get that bottle. I remember the story. I know why I bought the wine or why I like the wine. And I'm trying to, just out of fun, I'm trying to get to that point where I just absolutely hit that last bottle perfectly. I don't always have threes. Sometimes they're quite expensive wines, and I might only get them in twos. but in a perfect world, you have 3 and you can get there, or if it's more expensive, maybe it's 2, but you do what you got to do. Sometimes, like this Bondi Santai, I only have 1 bottle of this, and so I'd have to do a bit more research to get a sense of how it's going. One of the resources I use, which I find very useful, there's 2 places to use it, two online resources that I typically use. One is wine.com, because what wine.com does a good job of doing is bring all the different professional rating agencies, Vivino, Robert Parker, Wine Spectator, all together in one place. And if the wine has been is actually in the system, most of the wines are, you'll get 4 or 5 raters. Jeb Dunnick is another wine reviewer that I really enjoy. But you'll get some interesting feedback there at a professional level. What's a bit more useful over time is Cellar Tracker. So Cellar Tracker, you can go on, type your bottle in, so the Siapi 2016, and it'll tell you real time as people are opening the bottles, and how they're enjoying the bottles, how the bottle's evolving. As the bottles get older and older, though, what is very important is storage. So let's talk about storage for a moment. Depending on what your resources are and the size of your home, where you live, all these sorts of things, this will determine how much wine you want to collect and keep at any one particular point in time. And so for me, I have this little wine room. I wouldn't call it a cellar. It is, I would say, it's about 5 foot wide by about 15, 16 feet long. And so for me, and when these neat little racks over the racking system where the bottles can lie on their side, I can get 3 bottles deep all across here. And that gets me just the amount of wine that I think I need. So that's good for me, but you need to decide for yourself. It may be a 40 bottle small wine fridge. It may be a larger wine fridge. You might live in a place where you don't have too many extremities in terms of temperature. But storage is really important. So if you're going to be spending money on wines, more than $50 a bottle, some of these bottles are $500 to $1,000 a bottle. Certainly, as they age and become more sought after, you want to make sure that you are properly storing the wine. Otherwise, this is just going to be a big waste of money. Bottles like Scarecrow and Grange and Pingus and Masetto and these things, and Bordeaux's. These things need to be, you're investing some money here. You need to worry about storage. So for me, it's about temperature, vibration, humidity, and light. So, and being able to lie the bottles flat. This is really important in wine. When it comes to Scotch, you don't do that. You stand the scotches up. The mistake I was making until very recently, because you have 40 to 60% alcohol in a bottle of Scotch, and it'll eat through the cork. So keep your bottles of Scotch standing straight up. Don't lie them down. But your wines, absolutely lie them down. This is really, really important. So for me, it's about keeping the wine cool. I have in this room one of these small, I can't remember what it's called, but I have a little. You can buy these from, Costco or whatever, cut a little hole in your drywall and put it through. All you need is a little power switch. And I put mine at about 59 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about, I want to say 13 and a half, 14 degrees Celsius. So constant temperature, lying flat, away from vibration and away from direct sunlight. Really, really important. And what you'll find then is your wines will go really long. Red wine is a lot more robust than how people talk about wine, and a lot of the whites too. Certainly the dessert wines, which as you can see over here in my champagnes, and if they're treated well, they will last a very, very, very long time. Of course, every now and again you get a disappointment, which is why I keep saying, buy your bottles in 3s and keep trying them. Try a bottle after 5 to 7 years, the first bottle. You don't have to do that if it's Dominus, because Dominus is built to go 40, 50 years. Some of these Napas, Scarecrow and things like that, don't open that after 7 years. Open your first bottle at 10 to 15 years. But generally speaking, you have those bottles in 3s. So what have we learned here today? Decide where you're going to store and put something together that is away from vibration, away from light, direct sunlight, somewhere that has a constant temperature. It doesn't necessarily need to be very, very cold. It just doesn't, it shouldn't be fluctuating. You want to get away from major fluctuations of temperature. Of course, it shouldn't be freezing cold and it shouldn't be boiling hot. But assuming you aren't going to be at that, most importantly, you want to sort of smooth out those big waves of fluctuating temperature. And then, of course, having them lying flat. And it's not a bad thing I don't turn my wines, but it's not a bad thing to turn your wines over time. So now we've decided, we talked about how to store the wine. We've talked about where you want to store your wine. Now it's about budget. What are you looking for? And then, of course, the big decision, which was, is it for investment or consumption? For me, it's all consumption. I plan to drink everything in the cellar. I might die from alcohol poisoning, but I do plan to at least taste some of these wines. So and sharing with friends and family, of course, is really important. So it's assuming you don't have a crazy amount of money lying around, and so you need to put some thought into how you acquire and store. So there is wine to think about all across the spectrum. So you got to have some wines that you can pay $20 to $30 that can age, and there are those. Then you'll sort of go $30 to $70, or actually break that down. So let's just say 20 to 30, 30 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 200, and 200 plus. So those would be the categories, and I think you need some wines in all of those categories. Let's just focus on reds for now. So for example, in the $20-ish, there are beautiful wines like Carmen Gran Reserva. This is the 2012. I again bought in threes, but I just had a 2012 recently. I was a bit more concerned about trying this wine earlier on because, $20 a bottle, this could have some issues. Its Cab Sauv from the Maipo Valley in Chile was wonderful. I also then another wine which, I'm often looking for little wins here and there. So this Carmen Gran Reserva was on Wine Spectator's top 100 wine list. And so I noticed that, so there are some really good resources. I talked to you about wine.com and I talked to you about Cellar Tracker. Well, Wine Spectator puts out 100 bottle, their top 100 wines of the year. They're not all crazy expensive wines. This wine, I think, was number 63 on the list, and it was at that time, probably a $13 bottle of wine. And so there are some wines that have ageability and aren't too expensive. Another one of those is Pravada by Norton Winery in Argentina. It's a wonderful, mainly Malbec, but it's a blend of Cab and Merlot in there too. This again was about a $25 bottle of wine, as you can see in the back there, rated 93 points by Wine Spectator. And so finding these gems, these are 2012, so these are 10-year-old bottles. They've been sitting in my cellar for a while. I've tried them, they're fantastic. Then going up one more sort of level in the $30 to $50 range. This was about $40 a bottle. It's now about 40 to 50. Concha y which is another wonderful winery in Chile. I bought, so these are various vintages. This is the 2010. Then went on and I bought what have I got to, the 2012, 2013, 2014. I tried a 2010 recently, about a year ago, and it's again aging absolutely beautifully. These wines can age fantastically well. You can probably go in the 15 to 20 year. Taste them again in your threes to make sure that that's how it's going, because again, you need to make, you got to be, these wines that are a little cheaper are less robust and will be a lot more sensitive to properly age, proper environment. But was wonderful. So here's some examples of going up another level. Another fantastic value area is South Africa. So I've got a very decent collection of South African wines here. These are wines that are absolutely beautiful wines, wonderful wines, and compete with anywhere in the world, but will probably be in the $20 to $70 range, and can age very, very nicely. So that's the thing you want to do. Then you want to look at some other things like Chateauneuf de Papes. There's some wonderful Chateauneuf de Papes sort of in that $50 range. These are a little bit more, but there are some that's actually the Chateau de la Jardine over here is one of the ones in sort of a $55 range. But some of the Southern Rhone and Southern French wines are a wonderful way to put some wine in your cellar. And so those are some of the things there. Then you move on to sort of the $60 to $100 range of Brunellos, which are another beautiful way to invest in some wine. And I'm using the word invest from a tasting point of view, because you can buy these, you can lie them down for 15 years and they'll be absolutely beautiful. Bear in mind that these are more old world style wines. So cigar box, leather, dark cocoa, versus maybe, the Almond Ra, Syrahs from the Almond Ra, where from Australian wines, I love the Almond Ra. What you'll see, anytime you see this in different levels, it means different vintages. So I've got from the 2010 all the way up to 2016 there. But these are more sort of fruity wines, big, bold wines versus, as I said, certainly the Brunellos, as they get old, will have those old world flavors to them. And then, of course, your Super Tuscans, and around $100 a bottle over here are your Super Tuscans and your Tignanellos, which are beautiful wines to age. I've got a 10-year vertical here. So that's another thing, starting to build. So once you sort of get into this, so here your Super Tuscans, as I said, around sort of the $75 to $100 a bottle. And then your American wines, which are a big favorite of mine. The three most notable regions in the US would be your Californian wines, particularly Napa Valley, your Oregon wines, where they make absolutely incredible Pinot Noir, like these over here. Cameron in particular is a bit of a cult wine. The Abbey Ridge Pinot is phenomenal. And so there's that. And then, of course, your Washington State wines, which are just gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And here's some of the Northern Californian wines here, made by Ridge, another wonderful Californian. But understand something, when you're getting into these wines here, you are $200 plus, all the way up to $1,000 a bottle, etc., etc. Washington State wines you can get in a little bit cheaper. Something like Cool Cedar Creek, you'll be in sort of the $200 plus range, $200 to $300. But some of the other ones here, you can certainly be around the $50 to $100 bottle, and great wines. So that's, and I think you want to sort of build up. What a lot of people will do is think quantity and not quality. So what they might do when they start off is buy a whole lot of cheap wine. And I would suggest holding off doing that. I would suggest taking a long-term approach. I've been collecting wine since 1993. I remember that where I went out for dinner with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, with another couple. I remember the bottle of wine this person brought to dinner. I was a 20-something student, and I'd never seen someone arrive at dinner with a bottle of wine in hand. And this friend, who was the same age as me, had discovered wine 6 months earlier. And this guy walks into a restaurant with a bottle of wine. It's like, why would you bring food to a restaurant for dinner? And I started learning these concepts of, taking a bottle of wine and what wine meant. And it was the most fascinating dinner. And it pushed me down a path of just, wine and collecting and everything. I became hooked, and I was bitten by the bug, and have been ever since. But what I would say is, again, and when I started, I would buy all these wines at the time. This is back in the early 90s. I'd spend, in today's terms, sort of $10 to $15 a bottle, because I wanted to fill up the cellar. And I would suggest not doing that. I would suggest certainly have those, as I said, those $20 to $25 bottles in the cellar, but take a long-term investing approach, a long-term building up your cellar approach. Don't just, try and build bulk from day one, because you will regret it. And I would say sort of, maybe in a shopping cart, if I was going to go buy, 10 bottles of wine, maybe there's 2 bottles that are higher end that you can happily put down and you take them out for dinner in 10 or 15 years from now, and somebody would raise eyebrows. Wow, is that a bottle of 2009 Sassicaia? Maybe this is 10 years from now, say, and people will be very impressed with that. And it's a nice sort of thing to bring out over dinner. And so I would have a couple of those. I would have, in the 20 to 30 range, I might have, 5 of those in there. So that's set, or maybe 4 or 5 of those. And then sort of in the $30, let's do the math here. So maybe there's two bottles of really good stuff. Maybe something from Napa Valley, something really good from the Napa Valley side, 2 bottles of that. And then, you might pick up sort of 4 bottles of something like this over here, the Carmen or the Norton Pravada. and then you'll have, so that's 6 bottles, and then you might pick up 2 bottles of the $30 to $50 wines from a Concho y Toro or something like that. And then you'll pick up also sort of another 2 or 3, maybe it's a Don Melchor or something higher end from Chile. Maybe it's an Almond Ra from Australia. Maybe it's a Brunello, or maybe it's a Tignanello. Again, something that you could put down for a little while, and it'll age and really be impressive over time. So that's sort of how I put the basket of wines together. The other thing is, let's talk about verticals. What's a vertical? So in the wine collecting, what's really fun to do when you start getting going is building up concentric, so one year after the next. So for example, what I have here, I have a 10-year vertical of Tignanello. I have the 2009, 10, 11, all the way down to the 2018, which was released this year. So 2009 to 2018. And I've tried to do it with a few of my wines. Another wine I really enjoy is the Himalaya. I started it for the 2010, 2011, all the way through to 2017. The Almond Ras I'm doing that with. I've done that with a couple of the Terranos, which is a cheaper wine, but can do that really nicely. The Datura Infusion 5 from South Africa, which is a phenomenal bottle of Bordeaux blend. And I've got a few years of that. And so that's a fun thing to do. I've done that here with the Chateau de Beaucastel as well, out of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. So that's a fun thing to do. Buy some wines which are consistent from one year to the next, and you build up a collection of those. It's always fun to sort of take them out. I've done that with some of my Chardonnays from South Africa, my Hamilton Russells over there, and so that's just then again, really your wine collection should follow the pattern of your palate. I drink more red than I drink white, but I do like my sauternes and dessert wines, and I have a bunch of those. I don't have a lot of champagne here because I'm not a big champagne drinker. And when it comes to white wines, I certainly favor Chardonnay, so I have a little bit of that. So everybody, the one other thing I would say is, when it comes to large format bottles, be careful with those. I can barely find the scenario to be opening a Magnum, which is a double bottle. I had that. I purchased this bottle of Cristal, which I think was a 2000 vintage, but that was a big party of about 40 people. Investing a lot of money in those, you could find it. You need to know what you're doing when you're spending that kind of money. They are not cheap. And you'll need to have enough people around to do it. So think about that before you bought that. If it's something that makes sense for you, absolutely go ahead and do it. Otherwise, I would suggest Magnums and just your standard bottle. Standard bottle, by the way, they call it a Bordeaux bottle. So anyhow, everybody, thanks very much for listening. I hope this was helpful. Like, subscribe, and put out some questions or comments in the comment section, and I will absolutely respond to those. Have a wonderful day.